Good morning. Y'all can do better than that. Good morning. We announced $1 billion yesterday. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Colleen. Thank you for your patience, everybody who's been putting this event together. My life has been Six Flags' best roller coaster for the past year, but we reached a peak over the past couple weeks. Apologies, I won't hold you long. I'm more excited to hear from as many of the speakers as possible. You all know what my life is right now, but I will say I have to give a shout out to my incredible team. I have a dream team that has got us across the finish line to announcing all this amazing work. We are so excited for the communities that are the recipients of this funding, all the partners that will help us be successful in implementing this funding. And so if you didn't know, I read it one more time last night. We actually received an AP News article, Associated Press, and that was our goal, was to make it to be so badass that we got to AP. And what that meant was that all the local newspapers, all the small town and community papers could grab the news, right? They wouldn't get left behind. And so this whole experience has been about belonging and making sure no one feels like they don't belong in this space. And so I think we're on the path. There are about 20 slides in this reel, and I'm only going to use 2 of them. Thank you, Quinn, for an amazing slide deck. But as I was on the plane from Iowa yesterday to get here, I completely flipped the script because I went back and I was like, okay, what exactly do you all want to hear from me? You know, you got all the scholars lined up. And I want to learn from them. As the leader of the program, I feel like I have to continue to be a sponge. If we are going to meet people where they are and implement innovative solutions for urban forest and community green spaces, then I need to be in learning and listening mode continuously. But what I saw was on one of your earlier emails, Colleen, addressed to Mrs. Wilson, I was like, that's my mother-in-law. It was, you wanted me to speak urban forestry management for a more equitable future, right? So the assumption was that we were already somewhat achieving equity, right? And so I'm here to talk about the more piece, all right? So I speak in acronyms. I am not a keynote speaker, so y'all can take the keynote, but I'm just here to talk this morning. And as you can hear from my voice, I'm almost talked out, so I'm hanging in there tight. So MORE, and if you're taking notes, which most of you are going to be taking notes, I want to make sure that you grasp what we are thinking about in terms of urban and community forestry. Growing from 32 million, actually in fiscal year 22, we were at $36 million, and we were quite comfortable. You know, we're a 30-plus-year-old program. And then Inflation Reduction Act hit, and it was like, wow. And then our regular domestic budget went up to 40 million, right? So that's the core program. That's who we are, and the communities and how we've been able to tell the story that got the 1.5 billion. The relevance was connected to what we've been doing inside of that $36 million space, $40 million, and that was a historic high. So we had just pulled out the champagne glasses, right? And then life changed for us. So in the spirit of more, you know, let me just say, more funding doesn't mean anything if you don't put all the actions, all the commitments, and drive through with all the purpose and goals and objectives that we've said we wanted to achieve. We've always said if we had more funding, if we had more people, if we had more policy, if we had more support, we have more funding now, right? So excuses are going to become irrelevant in the near future. These communities have long been waiting for this type of relief, and we are excited to bring it to them. So $1.13 billion to 385 awardees. But the biggest story for us is that we normally have a $1 million program that's public facing that we can announce. That, you know, that's what we squeak off the top for our annual challenge cost share. This year, we had 842 applications. $6.4 billion was the ask across those applications. So on the day the Inflation Reduction Act was announced, we were asked, how in the world would your tiny little program ever digest $1.5 billion? And I said, okay, well, watch us work. Don't call me, I'll call you. So that is just a testament to how much need there is out there. We knew there were communities. We've been touching 7,500 roughly communities for years through our $36-ish million program, right? Working through our state forestry agencies. But now we have this chance to dig deeper into communities, not just go fund to state. We have an opportunity to fund to communities, to neighborhoods, to wards, to districts. We can get all the way in there, to faith-based institutions. And that's what we did. That's what we designed it, and we designed it through a lens of equity. So when we say more equitable, more is where we are trying to pivot to now. And so I want to say thank you for everybody who's in this space today and who's listening online, because it's going to take the whole of us if we're going to continue to achieve these funding levels, right? The biggest thing I get to say is that I had to leave $5 billion of good work on the table, right? I didn't have enough funding to meet all the asks that was out there. And so I will say thank you, Karen, for saying that we are the only program in the federal government dedicated to the nation's urban and community forests. We were hidden figures for a very long time, doing the work, meeting people where they were, but this is our season. And so I really want you all to be excited about the work we're doing, be excited about the connections we're making, to sit yesterday and listen to the White House and my Secretary of Agriculture speak fluently about the importance of trees in communities and tell their own stories and make their connections, favorite books, favorite trees in yards, favorite playgrounds, favorite places to hang out with their grandparents and family. Everybody has a story that connects them to a tree. And if we don't do anything else, let's make sure we leave the next generation with the opportunity to wander, to have those stories to tell, to have those connections to nature. We know the benefits of trees. We know the benefits of green spaces. And we're going to hear more about that today. For more, M-O-R-E, the M is for management. If you saw the notice of funding opportunity, it was bigger than just planting trees. As a Justice 40 covered program, we signed up and said that no less than 40% of the resources we received would go to the most vulnerable communities. We also went on a tour of stakeholder engagement, and we got to hear from communities. And it wasn't just that they weren't getting trees planted in their communities, but we all know that the most expensive part and the longest commitment comes with maintaining those trees so they reach their full potential. I'm channeling your energy. Yes. It's not just planting a tree, taking a selfie, and driving off, right? At least leave it with a gator bag or something, right? So managing the urban forest that we invest in was critical. So we asked for comprehensive proposals. We didn't just want to see, everybody's going to say, I'm going to plant 40,000 trees in the city. Where, first of all? Second, who's going to manage them? One of the biggest pain points we would hear from stakeholders was that they didn't have access to water, right? That was a critical issue. They didn't have the technical understanding and knowledge to really steward. So you planted all these trees in my neighborhood, but what do we do now, right? So planting plus maintenance equals the sustainability of that investment we've made. Budget justifications is also part of this M under more. Data does not lie, right? I'm looking at Phil Rodbell. I know he's waiting for me to say the R word, research. Research. We've got the science. we have to apply it, and we have to fold it into the story and make it make sense for those who are not card-carrying members of urban and community forestry. Budget justifications. If we're going to sustain this level of funding, pair the science with the social, with the storytelling, and we will get there. It's all about people. The ecological we get. Implementing this program we've done flawlessly for 30 plus years. Impact smells different than just implementation. You have to roll up your sleeves and work a little harder and get in there and gain the trust of communities if you really want to know how we can impact communities. The O, opportunities. Say it with me, opportunities. Opportunities we're looking for moving forward, because you know what we've done up to this point. Entrepreneurism is critical. Who's going to do the work? Who's going to do this work? We just put $1 billion into the system yesterday. Who's going to do this work? There was a workforce development component to the Notice of Funding Opportunity. Conservation Corps, Youth Climate Corps. We're looking to reach out and touch those adults who want to retool. We're looking at reentry citizens who want to return to their community in a positive light. This is not rocket science when we talk about doing the work. We can train pretty quickly and have the stewardship done by the residents of the community where we're making this investment. But that's the type of well-rounded commitment we have to be looking for. And that's what we have to demand, is that we don't just say, oh, we're going to keep using the same old contractors we've always used. We got to make room. Bigger table, more chairs. That's what this is about. Entrepreneurism needs to be thought through. Small business owners were at the table yesterday with the White House and the Secretary of Agriculture, speaking to the difference this makes for them and the who they employ as small business owners or locals, people who walk to work, right? And so this is what we're thinking about for the future of our program and how we can make a difference in communities. Employment diversity is critical. We have to make sure that we reflect urban America. And we have to be okay with making room for all of those trust partners that our communities need to see, that they will receive the information from. I've been so impressed with our faith-based institutions, our houses of faith coming to the table. They're already doing these things in their communities. Many of these same communities are food deserts, for example. Most of these houses of faith have food pantries. You know, they have a couple computers in the back so folks can fill out job applications. They run some type of child care or after-school program for parents who need that extra support. Most of these houses of faith have turned over the soil in their parking lot and actually have a small community garden, and now they've added fruit and nut-bearing trees, if that's possible for their community. So we have to meet communities and just roll with it, right? We know what we can do. We just have to use all of the alternatives. And then the last part about opportunities is creating forums. When we're making invitations, thank you, Quinn. Shout out to Quinn. My team takes so much care of me. Creating forums to keep getting stakeholder engagement. Continue to learn and listen from communities. It doesn't stop just because we got this funding out right now. We need to keep figuring out how we can get those solutions. The R is for reverse engineering. Say it with me, reverse engineering. If you want to know how you can make an impact and if your outcomes are going to be favorable and really hit home for the communities we're trying to serve, go talk to them first. What is it they want to see? Don't go in with your design and pull out your slide deck and everything's already baked, and they might feel like it's too late to disturb this brilliant vision that you've already put in place. Talk to them, make those connections. That's what we are encouraging our partners to do more and more and more. Urban forestry we've popped out, as my daughter says. And so now we have to be okay with all the ways that communities want us to show up. Impact versus implementation is what I said earlier. That's implementing is just us dividing by 54, pressing send, and we're just, going on vacation. Impact, means we are creating spaces for everybody. We're holding roundtables, we're holding coffee chats, we're having office hours open. Just Zoom and Microsoft Teams have created an opportunity that, is now the norm. So one of the barriers of I can't get there, I can't afford to get there, I can't make it to this conference, this symposium, we have created a space. We have 1,000 people listening today. They're getting the same thing. And so why not make more room, just as this conference is doing today? Justice 40 was an incredible opportunity. We were the first program to raise our hands and say we want to do it, right? I saw it as a tailwind. 40% is the floor, and us knowing our clientele in urban America, this is an easy win, right? But what I will say is that on yesterday's funding announcement, 1.13, I'm so proud to share that all of that investment will be flowing to disadvantaged communities. So not 40, but 100%. Match waivers are the way to the future. Match waivers were talked about so much in stakeholder feedback from communities about how they could never quite get to a lot of the grant and funding opportunities because they just didn't have it. Whether it's cash match or in-kind match, they just couldn't pull the numbers together. And if you've ever put an in-kind match together, you know. There's some stuff in there, right? Y'all are in-kind and all the way down to the paper clips. And so equity is leveling the playing field. And so just because you had match, it didn't put you any further in the front, towards the front of the line. This was all about vulnerability, equity, and using the climate and economic justice screening tool. We know where the ecological and environmental challenges are. But if you're going to come out of those timely, you got to also have some economic conditions. And if you are hurting now, and this money is for the next 10 years of urban forestry, and we didn't design this to catch those who are hurting the most now, then we're basically saying we're leaving you behind. Because this is the biggest investment. The sum of all 30 years of urban forestry doesn't add up to $1.5 billion. And so that's the decision making we were faced with. How much time I have, Colleen? 2 minutes, 1 minute, I'm done. I saw that stop sign up there. All right, I'm on my last letter, E. Education reimagined. Say it with me, education reimagined. We got to get out of just putting out written form of everything. Education, we had a high schooler in the roundtable yesterday with the White House, and he talked about how his generation is suffering or how they've been impacted, not just by the derecho, for example, that hit Iowa, so a natural disaster. They're also grappling with what they've lost in the years of COVID, right? And how life is so different for them, and how green spaces are different. Nature means something different to them now. So if we're going to also make sure the next generation has these green and nature-based investments, we got to make sure they are educated and understand why it's important for them to take the baton and steward these investments, because it's for their future as well. And so I'm always going to challenge, if you don't do anything else before you leave this symposium, you should take a selfie with somebody and post it on your social media and tag the person and the conference that you were in. The reason is because what we see and what we've heard through stakeholder feedback is that that's how they are connecting. That's how they're finding out who wants to be. If they see diversity, if they see visuals, they can understand what we're talking about when we see these trees are sequestering X pounds of carbon. Don't talk past them. Meet them where they are. If they're on social media, we're there. So visual, social, marketing, photograph local investments. As you are doing your work, keep taking pictures. Living libraries, living photo galleries are going to be critical, because we have to document this. If we're ever going to continue this level of funding, importance, and the policy that's come along with it. By the way, the match waiver was in my legislation. That wasn't homemade in my office. I don't have that kind of power. The match waiver came in my legislation. So policy matters. But you have to have the evidence to really make a compelling argument when we are having our legislators sit around the table. And if they can really understand it, see it, they can believe it, and they weren't hesitant to write it in. And the last thing I will say under education, reimagine, is the storytelling. It should be from an authentic voice. It should be first person of those who are receiving the assistance, so their story can be embraced and help the next community over. A lot of the communities suffering the worst from this climate crisis are Black and brown communities and underinvested communities. Seniors are vulnerable in this moment in time. And so we have to think about their stories and making sure that what we're doing honors their story, but we also capture their story in their voice. And the last thing I'll say is get out your silos. Get out your silos. Go to other people's parties. Go talk to housing. Go talk to education. Go talk to transportation. They don't bite. They have money too. They have more money than me. They want to know. They do. A lot of projects that were funded yesterday have a public housing component to it, right? So we're all in this crisis together. Transportation, they have a green space component to the funding they received under the Inflation Reduction Act. They want to know. They want to learn. They want to collaborate with everybody. And so we have this beautiful invitation. And we are currently the cool kids, right? So that's my talk, right? But before I sit down, because at one point I did want to be a school teacher, what was the M for? Were y'all listening? Let's try this again. What was the M for? O. R. E. Thank you all. Do you want questions? Okay, I got time for 2 questions. Oh, somebody's running. Don't run. Oh, we didn't need the slides after all. Hi, good morning. Question coming from over here.
Are they going to implement this system into the educational system of our students throughout the country?
Oh, that's a fantastic question. So we currently have a conservation education program in U.S. Forest Service, and it's been around for a very long time. Yesterday in the roundtable, as we were announcing, the Secretary of Agriculture asked for us to think about piloting an educational literacy component for K through 12. So as we are implementing all this money, how can we make sure that the grade school youth are seeing it real time? You know, we're talking about planting trees on playgrounds and in their schoolyards and in their neighborhoods, and it's going to be right there. Why would they need to wait until it's all said and done and everything's deeply rooted and growing? They need to be in from this earliest point. And so we took those notes yesterday, and we're going to go back. There are a lot of proposals that pull in schools, a lot of grade school collaborations. We do have one of our pass-through partners, their whole body of work is around planting trees and maintaining trees on schoolyards. And so that we're hoping that in a timely fashion, we can at least pilot with a few of our larger partner awardees to be capturing that real time. We do have a conservation education program. We have seen Project Wet and Project Wild thrive over the years, but this is very intimate to urban and community forestry and access to nature and green space. And so when my secretary talks, I listen. So stay tuned. But that's a fantastic question, because even he realized it real time yesterday at the table and said we should capture this and it should be embedded in the grade school system So they're learning and watching. So if you're working or if you're an awardee, just know that you should be talking to your local school system. I think next week, one of our amplification events will be in collaboration with a high school, and our deputy secretary will do that. And so there's going to be an education component to that. But we need some, I won't call it curriculum because that feels so far from now. But we need something right now. I'm sure it already exists. We've just not applied it. And so that just came out yesterday. But thank you for that question. And just make note, that's something that we should always be thinking about, is there's a living lab opportunity that we're experiencing. We're done with questions? Awesome. Enjoy the conference.